Hey, everybody, welcome to EduMatch. Thank you so much for tuning in. So, follow along with us at podcast.edumatch.org/tweet talk. Speaking of EduMatch, did you know that you could be the featured person of the day? Just sign up at our website, edumatch.org, and you'll see a sign up button on the top right hand side. And what that will do, once you sign up, if you leave your Voxer handle, we will drop you in the EduMatch Voxer group, which is lit. In addition, if you have a blog with an RSS feed, then with a findable RSS feed, then we'll definitely tweet it out to our network. And you're also going to be putting yourself in a queue to be the featured EduMatch person of the day. So there is a little bit of a wait, but the thing is that you will be tagged in the meantime with any matches that come up. So great way to supercharge your PLN. So the topic tonight is gamification, definitely a topic that I love personally. And we have an all-star panel with us tonight who are going to share with us their thoughts. And also, please share with us your thoughts on our YouTube live page as well as on Twitter. So we're going to start with introductions. So I'm going to kick it over to Tisha.
Hello, I'm honored to be here. I'm Tisha Richmond. I teach high school culinary arts in Medford, Oregon. I'm also the Discovery Lead teacher. And I've been gamifying for 3+ years. I've been in education for about 20 years. And I absolutely love this topic, super passionate about it.
Awesome. And we are super glad to have you here. So thank you for joining us. All right, next up we have Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Gross, and I'm a middle school literacy teacher in New York outside Rochester. And although I've been exploring gamification for a couple of years, I haven't really tried it until this year. So it's fairly new to me still.
Well, that is awesome. We're super excited to have you here and to hear your perspective. So thank you for joining us. All right, next up we have Steve.
Hello, my name's Steve Isaacs. I teach game design and development at a middle school, William Adams Middle School in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. So for me, game-based learning has always been at the heart of my course, but I've also gamified my course because I believe in certain aspects of gamification for sure. But it did always lead me to love to talk about gamification and game-based learning and distinguish between the two. So, don't get caught up thinking gamification and game-based learning are the same thing. Good to be here.
Great tip. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Steve. So great to have you on. All right. Next up, we have Matthew.
Hi, Matt Farber. I'm an assistant professor in technology, innovation, and pedagogy at the University of Northern Colorado. I was a social studies teacher for 9 years prior. My research is at the intersection of teacher education, learning technologies, and really good game-based learning. So how it looks in the classroom. I wrote a few books on this topic, Gamify Your Classroom in its second edition. Most recently, Game-Based Learning in Action, which studies the expert affinity group who teaches with games, which include a few of our panelists here, like Steve and Glenn Irvin, and what we can learn from the way that they use games in the classroom. I don't say that I turn my entire class, even teacher education, into a game, although I do use quests and choice-based learning. But I do put game-full learning first and game-like learning first. So we could talk about that later, how that looks. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. It's great to have you here and looking forward to diving into conversation with you. All right, thank you. Next up, we have Glenn.
Hi, everyone. Glenn Irvin here from, I'm actually in Wabasha, Minnesota, but I now work in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota as a technology integrationist and coach. And I just recently got that position in November. I'm super excited to be able to share my passion for gamification and game-based learning with the whole district of teachers. So it's a super exciting position. I'm also happy to be here too. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being here. Very, very excited to hear what you have to say tonight. All right, next up we have Garrett.
Hi, everybody. Garrett Zimmer here, also known on Twitter as PB Jelly Games. I've been working with educators like Stephen, like Matt, like Glenn, like Ben for a long time now, discussing and talking about gamification. And again, going back to Steve's point, gamification really versus game-based learning. I've also researched gamification deeply, and not only in the education environment, but also in the corporate environment. So I have some ideas around it that have come from both scenarios that I'm happy to share tonight.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to hearing those. So thanks for joining us, Garrett. And last and certainly not least, we have Ben.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Spildunner. I teach English, high school English, in the dead center of Ohio in a small town called Ashland, halfway between Cleveland and Columbus. And I have dabbled in gamification over the last year and a half, 2 years. I'm definitely all in for game-based learning and have been learning how to gamify my own class. I'm in the process of rewriting 2 courses that I used to teach into technical writing and reading courses using games. And ultimately then hopefully writing that curriculum down from 12th grade all the way down through 7th grade. So yeah, so I definitely use pieces of gamification, and I'm looking to actually learn myself from the great people on this panel. Thanks.
All right, awesome, Ben. Thank you so much. So super excited to hear from all of our amazing panelists tonight. So let's go ahead and jump right in the conversation. So let's calibrate and figure out what the definition of gamification is. What exactly does gamification mean? And on the flip side, if you could also please clear up the top misconceptions that you see or hear. So Steve, I saw that you unmuted, so go ahead.
Thanks. So, I mean, to put it real, I hope simply, gamification is really kind of the notion of adding game-like elements to, generally speaking, a non-gaming environment. So, you know, you get, like we were talking about, Sarah's in Starbucks right now, you know, cashing in her stars and living and dying by how many stars she has on her Starbucks card. That's, you know, an example of gamification. And then in the classroom, you know, essentially when we add game elements to the learning environment, not necessarily playing a game for the sake of learning, that's gamification, versus game-based learning, which is when the learning is at the game is at the center of the learning, and we're learning from playing a game. You know, I'll put it that way. I'll toss up a little link to an article that I wrote a while back, just trying to distinguish those two terms.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. All right. And if you could please just drop that to our hashtag EduMatch. All right. And Matt, how about you?
Well, noisy. There's somebody cooking coffee. So anyway, I will. Thanks. Gamification was some of my earlier research. Okay, and but currently my research is in game-based learning, and you know, I just tweeted out into the Institute of Play's game-like learning principles that I embed in teacher education, where everyone is a participant. Failure is reframed as iteration. Learning feels like play. Learning happens by doing. Feedback is immediate and ongoing. Challenge is constant, and everything is interconnected. When I use games to teach, it's so students and even teacher education students learn things like systems thinking, how to see things through the lens of what games are as models. And as Steve said, and I observed this in his class and other classes, that's how games are used, as affordances to learn. So students are invited into these playful situations. They play a game, maybe they review the game and write about it, and then they make their own game or make a sequel to it, something like that. Very much the way you would use a novel in a class. It's a piece of new media. Whereas gamification can be in low level, it can be like that idea of like where it's stuff and access and power, and I don't know what the other one is. But that sort of gamification to something more high level, where the classroom itself is more like an alternate reality game, is set in a context of a game, like what Glenn Irvin did with, or still does, right, with Minecraft. And I think he might be really good at from there, or Tisha also, the way she does it with cooking, which is also, I should say, a very playful activity. So gamification works best if the student is not just doing worksheets, obviously, or the boss level is not a test, but it's something playful like project-based learning.
Right, great point. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to go next to Teresa.
So I think a misconception that even I had about it is that I think gamification and I think games. And I don't know anybody in my, school that does it. And after I've explored it further, I see how it's another form of differentiation for my students. Like I liked reading about the different type of players and how when you design tasks, you actually try to design them, to hit those different types of learners. I also think being a language and literature teacher, picking a book or a setting or something like that, it's so easily adaptable to it. So I tried it with City of Ember, and it was really easy to kind of replicate it and put those elements in. But what I discovered was that it was a great way for my kids to work on things like problem solving and risk taking and collaboration and how to talk to one another. And what do you do when you get frustrated? Or what do you do when you get bored? Or what do you do when you don't know what to do? So it was a really good learning experience for me and for them, because I think some of them are gamers naturally and some of them are not. And it was interesting to watch them, as they try to kind of engage in it. But it's so much more than I thought it was going to be before I started really looking into it and then trying it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that comes with it. So definitely, thank you for sharing that. All right, let's go to Ben.
Yeah, there are just a few simple misconceptions, I think, also when it comes to gamification. I know there were some that I had at the start. I think one of those is the idea that you have to have a complete system in place to be able to use some elements of gamification. And I don't think that's the case. So I think some teachers are hesitant because they feel like they need to design an entire system. I think another huge misconception is the idea that that teachers need to use the same sorts of elements, gamification elements, throughout the entire year when certain elements may be appropriate for different units. And so you don't have to necessarily use all of the elements for the entire school year, but you can use them for different unique units. And the last point I wanted to make too was this idea that teachers also can learn quite a bit from students when it comes to gamifying their classroom. I think as teachers we're probably not always all that great at getting student input, and so I think especially when we have these students as gamers, one great way to figure out how to incorporate some of these elements into your classroom is to simply ask the students. And then you can work on things like perseverance and as Matthew said, this willingness to fail, because you don't see it as failure, you see it as learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. So seeing it as learning, I love that. All right, cool. So let's jump next to Garrett.
So I'm glad that I'm not the last person to speak here, because I think I'm going to go on the other side of the balance equation to some of the challenges that gamification has. So in my research, when I was in the corporate industry and the corporate field into gamification, putting together gamification programs, one of the interesting things that came out about it was that it's very, very good for motivation. It's great for extrinsic level motivation techniques. It's why we have badges, we have points, we have the experience bars that we put into the classroom and overlay that on. To Steve's point, game-based learning and the difference between game-based learning and gamification. Games have been used for centuries and centuries and centuries to actually teach particular skills. What I like, and one of the big misconceptions that maybe it's my misconception versus other people's, but I see a lot of people like Glenn, like Stephen, like Ben, who are actually taking what they call gamification and bringing it into the classroom. And I disagree with a lot of people when they say that's gamification. I think it's actual game-based learning. When you can create a system of play where the game or the classroom, the activities actually become the play sphere. It becomes that sort of escape away from, we have to do this worksheet because we're going to get a bunch of XP that's going to then beat our friends out of that. When we get out of that and we get into more of a holistic game-based learning environment, or an environment where there's a goal, there's risk reward, there's opportunity to learn, opportunity for failure, and there's growth in that, a lot of critical thinking, that I think creates this sort of game-based learning area. So gamification to me has to do with just those little bits and pieces, bringing it in one piece at a time. And it's a great starting spot. But the problem that I see, and what I encourage teachers that I work with to do, is look beyond that and look at gamification versus game-based learning, as the gamification side is kind of that exterior component of our bodies. It's the skin, it's the muscles, it's kind of there. If we don't have the bones, the game mechanics, the other elements of game-based learning in place, then the body is not going to stand up for too long. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth. It's not, the end all be all, of course, but I'm sure others will have more feedback on that.
All right, cool. Thank you, Garrett. All right, so let's go next to Glenn.
I'll follow up on what Garrett was talking about here, and just emphasize that as a coach now, I really want my fellow teachers to not be intimidated by the concept of gamification. So I introduce a variety of different things that they could do within their classrooms right now, today. I think that's the most important thing, is to be like, I don't want you to think next year. I want you to say, this next unit, this next lesson, how can we make it more playful? I like that term when people are bringing that up, playful learning. And that's really what we're talking about, is get away from what you've normally done and say, okay, what are some elements that we can go ahead and borrow and of that have to do with games, or games themselves, because those are already out there, whether it be Minecraft or commercial games that people are already using. Borrow their stuff, adapt it to fit your things, and then be able to use it. That's my biggest push here, is I want people to get out there and try these things, because there's so much magic that has occurred in my career as a Spanish teacher the last 20 years. In the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, with Minecraft, with these gamification elements that occurred in my class that would have never happened if I didn't take that risk. So I think that's the biggest thing. Jump in there, try some of these things, check out, do some research, of course, but persevere and go ahead and take the risks and try those things out.
Absolutely. So jumping in feet first and getting your feet wet and learning. So awesome. All right. And Tisha, how about you?
Well, I'm definitely on the same page as this amazing panel here. I would say the biggest misconception I think that people I have found have is that they think it's all about the points and badges, and it's so much more than that. It's so beyond that. What I found is that since I've gamified, it's just created this atmosphere where the creativity, the collaboration, the communication, the critical thinking has all been amplified. And I can't honestly imagine now going back to how I used to teach. In my classes, I think of it as this framework that I layer over my curriculum. So we create a storyline for the class, and then I apply the game mechanics on top of it. And it's just amazing how the classes come to life since I've done that. And I would also say, I think sometimes people get caught up, they think, oh, it's going to cause this really competitive environment. And what I've found is that the collaboration is at an all-time high in my class. Sure, there's competition and there's fun, friendly, there is that in there, but what I found is that kids come together as a team. They're bonding more than they've ever bonded before. They realize that their skills and their own personalities play into the class and are important. And if they're gone, their classmates miss them. And so I just can't say enough about what it's done for my classroom atmosphere, how it's amplified learning in so many ways.
Absolutely. And some of the comments on YouTube Live are kind of mirroring what you were just sharing, Tisha. So Julia, shout out to Julia and shout out to everyone on the YouTube Live page, was talking about helping her students work with others for a goal. And Beth was saying that she's hoping for what you're talking about. So absolutely. So that collaboration piece. Wonderful. Okay, great. So that was our first question. So now we're going to shift gears and talk specifically about different elements that each of you have in your gamification system. So what kind of elements does your game consist of?
Are we starting with me?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So I gamify 2 different classes that I teach. I gamify my Culinary 2 and my Culinary 3 class. My Culinary 3 class, I have a theme called the Amazing Food Truck Race for first semester. It's a game that I layer over my entire first semester of Culinary Arts 3. And my students work as teams, and basically the idea is they have created this food truck concept. They've created a food truck name. They have to pitch it to an authentic audience. We invite local food trucks in, we invite our staff in, and they have to create a signature dish for their food truck. And we are moving across the United States from Medford, Oregon to Medford, Maine. And as we explore each of the United States regions, we're learning about regional cuisine. They are diving in to researching that particular region. We have some mini challenges that we have within the unit, like mystery box challenge. And then they have to adapt their signature dish to the flavor profiles and cuisine of that region. And then we invite an authentic audience back in, and then all the food trucks are basically telling this authentic audience what they know. They've created iMovies, they've created other different things to share, and then they are sharing this signature dish that's been adapted to that particular region. And authentic audience, the customers are coming in with play money, and then they are evaluating these students' food trucks. So that's the general idea of my game for that class. So it's this food truck theme, it's the storyline that I've created, and then I've applied game mechanics like we have some currency that they use that they earn at the end of each region. We have some side missions, adventure quests that they can go on, some different, there's a lot of different mechanics that play into it. I could talk forever, so I don't want to talk too long.
Oh, this is great. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I had the pleasure of seeing you present at OETC like this past year, and just the stuff that you're doing just blew my mind. It blew me away. So great stuff. Great stuff. All right. And then we're going to go next to Ben. Ben, I know that you're going to have to leave us after this, so definitely want to hear your perspective on this question.
Yeah, thanks. So as Garrett said, I do a ton of my class of game-based learning, and the gamification piece of it is something that I've kind of been working on a lot more. So I'm going to answer this in two separate ways, and then I'll let people decide which, depending on their definition of gamification, how this is going to work for them, I guess. So I guess one way that I'm using gamification, although I'm not necessarily sure that would actually be the official term for what I'm doing. I know. So I teach a junior, senior level English course, and it's very non-traditional in terms of the way that I teach it. And most of their grade is based off of growth. And so, all their writing is based on rubrics. And then if they grow from one writing to the next, then they get, of course, full credit. And so those students who are not as strong writers have the opportunity to still do well in the course because they're continuing to improve, which I know that, of course, is a form of gamification, even though I don't really call it that way. They don't really get XP for it. I mean, it's kind of very simple. But I started doing that after I started using games in the classroom, and I realized that what students really want is they want to see growth. They want to know that they're getting better as they continue the course. And I think just simply giving them a better grade doesn't necessarily show growth, but if you can show them how they've improved over the course of time in terms of their writing in the same rubric, I think that makes a big difference. And it's kind of like playing like the same level on a game, and eventually you start to learn some of the nuances of that level, and you become better and better at it. So on the more probably game-based learning side, although there are elements of gamification in the classroom when we do this, I just finished a huge project with Simon Baddeley, who is also a Minecraft Global Mentor. The two of us collaborated on a project, and it turned into an argumentative writing project using Minecraft. And so Simon created the world, and then I threw characters in from Romeo and Juliet, and this all happens after Romeo and Juliet took place. Classic, right? And what happens is students have to then explore Verona, and they have to talk to various characters that are still alive after Romeo and Juliet. And what they discover is that the fighting is broken out between the Montagues and Capulets once again, and that they have to solve the crime. So they have to figure out who has started all this fighting. And so they have to explore the whole level. I mean, the whole world. And there's a lot of people. It takes an hour and a half to 2 hours for the kids to explore, and then they have to collect evidence, and then they go talk to the chief watchman. And when they talk to the chief watchman, they get thrown in jail because they have evidence on them that characters have given them, because the characters didn't want to have it on them, and so you get thrown in jail. And the only way you can get out is to write an argumentative essay in which you state that you're innocent, and then you have to also throw out there who you think is behind all of it. And so there are a lot of elements of gamification and game-based learning kind of in that whole thing, and it's kind of, it's kind of a big jumbled up mix there. But that's just the most recent project that I've been working on. And like I said, the longer I used game-based learning, the more I learned about gamification. And the more I learned there really are two very different things, even though on certain projects they can kind of go hand in hand. So yeah, I'm kind of learning as I go as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. I taught English as well, and I never thought to do something like that. So that is super, super cool. All right, so we're going to go next to Teresa.
So I'm like the newbie here who's just beginning her journey. And I love that with the Romeo and Juliet and writing the argument essay. That's awesome. So I probably spent like a good 6 weeks to 2 months, like just researching and figuring out even how to go about it. And I think that trying to duplicate a game, it was just totally outside my comfort zone because I don't really know games very well. And I think taking literature and adapting a setting from that was so much easier for me. So I took the city of Ember, and then I took elements from the city of Ember, and that kind of became our world that they were working within. And like Tisha said, like it's just magic just watching them work together. I loved seeing, who like kind of came out as the leaders and things like that. So we had different characters that were from the city of Ember. We had different badges. We had different jobs. I did a breakout box actually to kind of kick it off, and then we kind of went from there. I think my mistake though was I have a very student-centered classroom, and they make a lot of the decisions with me. And I think that part of it was I didn't involve them in creating that world. So we actually kind of decided as a class to just table it for a little bit. And we have a science fiction unit that's coming up. And we had talked about that when we started a science fiction unit, they can create their world and they can kind of create what they want their game to be. And then, I can work within that and create things within that. But I think there's a little bit more buy-in from them. I teach 8th grade, it's language and literature class, and they're excited to kind of create it themselves. And I did have one girl say, I miss that gaming that we were doing. Like, I wish we could keep doing that. And they loved like the competitiveness. They loved just getting like the badges and stuff like that. But I also think they were challenging themselves to be able to complete the tasks, that I had designed within it. So definitely at like the beginning stages of it. But I think that was one of my aha moments, is that if you have such a student-driven classroom, like I have to involve them in it to have them be engaged in it. But the good thing about it is that now they kind of know what it is because they've seen me do it a little bit. So now when they go to do it, they have a little bit of direction with it. So we've tabled it for a little bit, but we're coming back. It's coming back in about 4 weeks. So we're not giving up yet.
That is super awesome. I love the student agency component that you just talked about. So awesome stuff. All right, so let's go next to Glenn.
Okay, so I had basically some different ideas all come together at the same time. I was inspired by Dr. Haskell. I was in one of his graduate level courses, and one of my big inspirations is actually on his panel, Garrett, and he helped me basically to just take the dive into a combination of gamification and game-based learning. My classroom structure, I would call it the way that I set up the units, those types of things were all set up in gamification elements. There was XP, there was choices on what you decided to go ahead and complete. So there was some quest-based learning there. But the class itself, I wanted it to be hosted within a game itself. So Minecraft did that job perfectly. And so my Spanish 2 students basically did an entire quarter of work, so 9 weeks worth of work. And we met each day inside of Minecraft. And the number one rule was that we needed to just communicate in the Spanish language. So I set up all these different quests, all these different missions. The students collaborated during class, and they basically did all of their homework outside of class. And so it was a completely different kind of scenario. And what ended up happening was my students were super motivated to come to class, super motivated to stay in the language, and then they wanted to go ahead and grow. They didn't want to just stay and learn the vocab that was being presented to them at a base level. They wanted to go ahead and push that to boundaries that I wasn't even ready for them to go ahead and do. So each week I challenged them with different things. So some collaborative tasks, some competitive tasks, but all within the game itself. So whether it was gamification or game-based learning, I always just tell people, take a dive out there, go try some things out, and then learn from what other people have done, and then take the risk. And I guarantee you're going to find some awesome results. And some of the feedback that I got back from my students, the best feedback was really from students who had disengaged from school. They didn't want to be at school anymore. They were in my class, and they were who I considered to be the zombie students. They were just there because they had to be, and I wanted to make sure I made a connection with them. Those students still have contact with me. They still talk about stuff that they do in their own lives. So if you can just do that, I think that's a great, amazing thing. Besides the results that I was getting as far as in the Spanish language itself.
Absolutely, and great point. I heard that also from Chris Aviles when we were having some conversations about gamification. He was saying that he was seeing that the students that it was most effective for were the ones that traditional methods had kind of left behind. So it's a great point. Thank you. All right, so we're going to go next to Steve.
I'm glad Glenn brought up Chris Haskell. Chris and Lisa Dolly from Boise State, they created something called 3D Game Lab, which is where I really got my start moving from just my game-based learning to thinking, hey, let's go a step further and bring in some of the gamification stuff. And they offered something, I wonder if they still do it, but it was called Teacher Camp. And I was able to participate in their teacher camp, which was, of course, gamified and quest-based and all. And that really got me to kind of experience it, to then do it. But the thing that I found profoundly, that had the most profound impact was the choice-based learning component and quest-based learning. So that's been sort of the, my big thing has been, really growing towards a student-centered, choice-based, passion-driven course where my kids, my goal is to help them find their passion and give them many different opportunities and learning pathways to get there. And, it's kind of nice teaching game design because there are so many different, if you're in the game design or game development industry, there are so many different roles that you could take. So in my class, I have this great opportunity to provide options that, allow kids to create design teams and learn about different areas in game design, figure out what they're most interested in. And on a similar note, there's so many different game development tools, so I can provide options for them to develop. I teach in my class, the most important thing is that they learn the iterative design process. So giving them choices as to what product they use, it has been really successful. And one of the other things I heard somebody else say, which I believe in strongly, is that student agency and having kids involved in the whole process. So with what I like to do is, when you start building quest lines in a class, you start to see which ones the kids are excited about and gravitating towards. And I encourage kids to help me expand those quest lines. So I have one kid who's really had a voracious appetite for coding. So I offer all these coding quests, and she then comes back to me and says, oh, can we add this coding quest? So her role now is often coming at me with the reflection questions and things, and she kind of essentially develops the next quest, and then I bring that into the system. So anyway, that's kind of where I am, and the choice-based component and experience points becoming the element to drive their grade. And one last thing I'll say is, in something I call iterative grading too, is when the kids submit a quest, I'll evaluate it, and if it's not, up to par, then I'll give them feedback, and we get into that feedback loop, and they get to iterate and then submit it again until it is acceptable. So there you go.
Love that. Love the multiple attempts at mastery. So awesome. All right, cool. Let's go next to Garrett.
All right, let me just pull out my notes here because my memory is not as good in my old age anymore. I look young, but I'm not. I love the ideas. I want to go back to my earlier statements on game-based learning versus gamification and just clarify. And it was clarified by somebody else. I forget exactly who said it, but it was, they're both sort of different levels of each other. And I think the most important thing for teachers, I think it was Glenn, when coaching teachers, is to, yes, start small. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to get your feet wet, get into that, try a couple of little elements here, see what really piques your children. The secondary point to that is exactly what many people are saying is get in touch with students. The reality is the majority of kids are gamers today. In fact, I think it's 92%. By NPR research said that kids are gamers. So we can get valuable information from them. We can design our course as a game if we bring them into the mix. Going back, though, after that to what Glenn was saying is one of the big things. And I think Glenn, I remember working with him very, very closely on Minecraft and getting him up to that level of, what I consider true game-based learning, which is, giving the students an opportunity to learn via the game mechanics, via the game itself. And, one of the things that he was tremendously good at is creating these immersive scenarios. And that becomes a huge thing. And it's a theme that I've been seeing all over, which is why I say everybody on this panel is not doing gamification. They're actually doing game-based learning, in my opinion. But either way, whatever we define it as, giving that immersive challenge brings players, again, going back to student agency, back to a place that they're comfortable with and they're familiar with. When kids play games, they know that they're playing a game. They know they're in a different scenario. They become engaged. They become truly excited. They become, the best analogy I have is when we're playing Mario Kart and you see a kid playing Mario Kart or a racing game and they start doing one of these. Right? They're moving with the game. There's a deep, deep, deep-seated connection there. And that, I think, is where we drive the learning. So focusing on choice-based, quest-based, this is something that I try to do in every single one of the learning games that I create and all the different environments out there that I work with game-based learning. I bring those elements in, create the immersion, and that's what truly sets the kids up for this desire to stay within it rather than, oh God, I have to go to school tomorrow. No, it becomes something fun, immersive, inclusive, and you get that agency and you get kids sparked with that interest to work together, to critically think, and to grow from that. That's all.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So I'm going to kick it over to Matt.
Okay. Thanks. Going to hit on some pedagogy here and some that's in my research, my book research, which stems from my dissertation research also. So yeah, I agree with what PB Jelly Games is saying here, right? That, yeah, we are doing games first, right? But there is a gamification element for sure. But it's not gamification without game or project involved. And then, of course, we shouldn't really be too concerned, I don't think, with what definitions are. As long as you're doing something that's playful and gameful and that's driving learning. But what's going on here is we know that there are certain elements of games that really lend themselves best for classrooms and certain elements that lend themselves more for, I don't know, commercial products like Starbucks, gamifying there, right? So in a classroom, I like to look at what's called gameful learning. And this stems from research led by Remy Collier and a few others. I won't rattle off all the names, but basically it's like a big Venn diagram, not so big, 3 spheres. One has to do with something called projective identities, which is what James Paul G has dubbed. And it's basically when you take on this different role in the game. Now, when you're taking on a different role in Mario Kart, you're actually, when you're moving like that, that's actually part of what's called a parasocial connection. And you may get that in a TV show when you identify with a character and you're transported into that fictional world. But games have a different type of emotional connection because of that agency. The other part is illusory attitude, which is something Bernard Suits wrote about in 1978. That is, you buy into the artificial constraint system of the game itself. When you're in illusory attitude, everything falls into place. Grit, growth mindset, those are like symptoms, really. If you have illusory attitude, that all falls into place. because you're playing in this low stakes consequence. If you fail in Glenn Irvin's Minecraft world, you're not going to be a failure in life, right? It's in the context of a game. And the last part, which is quite important, and I've stressed this at a recent talk, is this notion of playful ignorance, not knowing what's going to happen, using more non-didactic games. So if you're cooking, or if you're in Minecraft, or any of these other English language arts worlds, or anything like that, you may not have that certain outcome, where the answer is in the back of the book, and don't look, as Ken Robinson says. So what I've observed in these classrooms is an exemplification of what's in Lifelong Kindergarten, Mitch Resnick's new book, where students are brought into these playful situations driven by choice. And going one step further, the teachers and everybody on the panel, I would venture to guess, who's in education, also views teaching itself as gameful. They put on different hats. So they're creating a system of virtual internships, which is another thing I read about in the book, where, Tisha is not a teacher in a classroom, right? She's a whole food truck, right, industry. And the students are no longer students. They are chefs, right? These are mentorship models. So the teacher has this idea of not knowing what's going to happen in each class, which makes teaching actually exciting, right? I think that would do away with burnout in teaching. You've got this notion of identity play and illusory attitude itself when you bring in rich and interesting games into the classroom. So I think that's a really important element, and gamification and the points and badges we've seen is good to have. It provides structure, but that comes second to gameful learning.
All right, great point. Thank you so much for sharing that, Matt. All right, so we are going to dive into our last question. So we kind of revised it as we're closing out right now. So it's going to be a speed round. So just going to get about maybe 20 seconds reflection from each panelist, going from my left to my right. So the last question will be, what do you think is, oh, I need to consolidate that. The last question, we'll just leave it with where people can go to find out more. So your best resource for gamification. Okay, so we will start first with Garrett.
Haha, loaded, and Glenn's gonna hate me and Matthew's gonna love me. I'd say I'm nearly done Matthew's first book, and it's a phenomenal read to get to understand what game-based learning is and gamification and how to use those in the classroom. The other resource that I would suggest is Twitter. Every one of you are on Twitter. Follow the Games for Ed chat, hashtag Games for Ed. Lots of talk over there. One of my favorites to peruse recently is the Mr. Matera's, the Teach Like a Pirate folks, is XPLAP. I believe that is somebody else. Please clarify me. And of course, we talk a bit about gamification, mostly about game-based learning when I'm kicking it off with the Minecraft Edu chat. So, make Twitter your home, follow the different people that are on this panel, because again, you're just going to get some great resources. Whether or not you agree with the viewpoints or not, there's always somewhere to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Garrett. All right, going next to Glenn. What would be your go-to resources to learn more about gamification?
Well, since Garrett stole mine, it's totally fine. I would totally agree. Matt Farber's book, Gamify Your Classroom, anything that is written by Jane McGonigal, just to get yourself in that mindset of saying, hey, we're in this current time period right now, but not too far away. And actually, it's here, I believe it's here right now. We're going to really be pushing our boundaries of virtual VR, really using games as our learning tools in a variety of content areas. And many schools are like adapting these types of elements, and you can be right on the edge of that and really pushing those boundaries. Just like Garrett said too, Twitter, the XPLAP hashtag, the Games for Ed hashtag, and then of course the Minecraft EDU hashtag also. I'd follow all of those and then just start asking people questions. Honestly, that is what I did. I had no idea what I was doing. I just started asking some questions, and man, it led me to some great places. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn. All right, great. How about you, Matt?
Well, I'm not going to self-promote, but I'm going to say that actually a lot of my research is framed around affinity groups. So what we have here, even the panel, right, and on Twitter and all the hashtags and everything, is affinity groups. And it was exciting for me in my new book that Jim G wrote the foreword because he's the guy that came up with the phrase affinity group, right? But that's what we are. We all have this affinity for game-based learning. And, there are a lot of affinities. We have affinities for Shakespeare, right? Or affinities for, whatever other interests that we bring into the classroom. And affinity spaces here, like Twitter, online social media, is really important. I think one of the best elements we see from gamification and game-based learning and project-based learning and inquiry-based learning is that teachers are viewing themselves as designers and not as deliverers of content, like in the 20th century. Like when I go on Breakout EDU's Facebook page, teachers are sharing these locks that they found on Amazon, or on any of the Twitter chats, like the Explore Like a Pirate chat, or any of these chats, Games for Ed. We see teachers sharing what works and what doesn't work, who's new and who's not new. In the terminology, Steve is stewards a lot. Like he brings people into the community, and they go from lurkers to starting their own Twitter chats, right? So these are really important elements. I think that's actually even almost more important than teaching with games, is teachers' mindsets change, that they are sharing these ideas. They are designers of lessons, not deliverers of lessons.
Awesome. Designers and not deliverers. Love it. Thank you, Matt. All right, going next to Steve. Steve, what are your go-to resources to learn more about gamification?
My go-tos. So I will put that feather right in Matt's cap. The really more so what I love about Matt's work is that he right now I think it's almost the definitive guide to both game-based learning and gamification in terms of the breadth of people that Matt managed to interview and all the different perspectives and it really covers the gamut of what's going on. A few others.
Thanks, you get a free book.
Yeah. Barry Fishman is definitely somebody worth noting at the University of Michigan. Carl Kapp, and my go-to always is Twitter and building those relationships. I just love nothing more than when you toss a question out on Twitter and just start that discussion. It's like immediate feedback and resources, and it's tremendous. So the people are the resource. But yeah, definitely. If you haven't read Matt's book, you should.
Absolutely. So shout out to Matt.
Oh, and actually, let me say, I'm sorry, one more that I did read. Mike Matera's book, Explore Like a Pirate, really also is a very nice introduction to gamification in terms of the different elements and stuff. So that's another one worth checking out.
Both of them together make a really good Valentine's Day.
And I bet on Amazon when you buy Matt's book, it probably recommends that, gives you a little bundle of them two together and all. Yeah. So yeah, go for that.
That is too funny. Yeah, so give that to somebody you love. Absolutely. All right, so thank you, Steve. All right, let's go next to Teresa. What are your go-to resources to learn more about gamification?
Definitely Explore Like a Pirate and Tisha and Mike Matera with their chat. I also have jumped into badge chats because I don't have a full understanding of badges. So even like going to specific elements of it, chats, they're kind of devoted to that. The other thing I found really helpful is blogging about it and just reflecting on my own experience. And a lot of times people will respond back to give me ideas, but I think it lets me go back and kind of look at my journey a little bit too. And that's been really helpful as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And last and certainly not least, Tisha.
Hi. Well, you guys have mentioned it all, but I have to shout out Michael Matera because he's been a huge inspiration to me, and that's how I got into this whole amazing realm of gamification. So definitely Explore Like a Pirate. And check out his website too, xplab.com. And I have started this venture of blogging this past year and have been able to really reflect on my practice. And it's been amazing too. And my blog is tisharrichmond.com. So Twitter, amazing. I mean, you guys all named it all. So there's nothing more to add.
All right, that is super awesome. Thank you so much, Tisha. And I'm seeing that everyone is giving a lot of kudos to Noah Geisel. So shout out to Senor G. So definitely. So wanted to thank all of you tonight for taking the time out to chat with us and to share about gamification. So really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you to everybody who was tweeting along with us and to everybody who's on the YouTube live page. Quite a bit of interaction on the YouTube live page. So great conversation from all those involved. So thank you all so much. So there was a question about your Twitter handles. So I will be tweeting out a graphic probably around 7:30 Eastern-ish with just to thank all of you and to thank everyone who is watching with us, and we'll tag all of you with your Twitter handles in there. So I just wanted to thank everybody again. And just a reminder, at 7 o'clock Eastern, which is in 10 minutes, we're going to be having a special episode featuring Terrence White. So you definitely don't want to miss it. Same bad channel, podcast.edumatch.org/tweet talk. So hope to see you all there. And everyone have a great one. Take it easy.